Is California the best place to own real estate for the long term? Today I want to talk about property taxes and how it impacts you depending on how long you're owning your house for and how your property value adjusts every single year. So a lot of people don't consider property taxes when they're buying a house, but arguably it's one of the most important factors that you need to consider, at least determining finances of your home. You don't want to have yourself in a situation where your mortgage is paid off, yet your property taxes are hindering your ability to enjoy your life in retirement. And that's what a lot of people do need to consider, because real estate is for the long term. A lot of people will buy a house, keep it for 5 years, upsize, downsize, or 1031 out of their investment property into another one. But for a lot of homeowners, they'll keep it for 20 or 30 years, 40 years, and that is where it impacts you the most when discussing property taxes. So if you aren't aware, California, the property tax rate is 1% of the purchase price of your home. In some counties, it differs. In LA County, it's 1.25%. Orange County, it's 1%. But for the most part, California as a whole is 1% property tax rate. Now, they do have a limit on how much that can increase every single year, which differs greatly from most of the country. So California, the limit on how much it can increase is 2%. So if you buy a $1 million house, your property tax, roughly $10,000 a year. The limit on how much that can increase, by the way, doesn't mean it has to increase, but the limit is $200 per year. So that's good news for long-term homeowners, because you don't want to get yourself into a situation where you buy a house, the house doubles in 10 years, and now your property taxes are double, which is what happens in most of the country. Now, Florida is another state that does have a limit on how much your property taxes can increase. Their limit is 3% for people that live in the house, so primary residences. But if you own an investment property, that limit is 10%. So even if your house value doubles in 10 years, your property taxes will still double in 10 years, because the limit is 10%. 10% every single year is 100%, which is doubling. Now, I know a lot of people are in this situation where they bought a house 6, 7, 8 years ago, and now their property taxes have doubled because the market value of their home has doubled. And after watching a lot of videos from homeowners in Texas and other states where prices increased quite a lot in 2019, 2020, and 2021, some of them are in a situation where they can't afford their property taxes anymore. The reality is the initial property tax rate is already higher in Texas than it is in California. And if that house goes from $400,000 to $800,000, your property taxes have doubled. So if you are paying 1.5% on $400,000, which is around $6,000 a year, and that home's value goes from $400,000 to $800,000 in less than 10 years, you are now paying $12,000 every single year in property taxes. And if you double that again 10 years from now, you'll be paying $24,000. If you double that again 30 years from now, you'll be paying $48,000 every single year in property taxes. Now that is pretty unmanageable for most people who were just buying a $400,000 house and hoping to live in it until they retire. How do you afford that payment when you're in retirement, thinking that you're probably not going to be making as much money as you were when you initially bought the house? You're maybe surviving on your investments. That is an enormous amount of money. Now that same property, if it was purchased in California, your property taxes are almost the same as what you bought it for, which is significantly easier to manage. That's why for a lot of homeowners that bought a house in 1990 for $200,000, $250,000 in desirable parts of California, their home is now worth $2.5, $3 million. And the only reason they can afford it is because they bought it at such a low price. But for homeowners who are buying houses right now, obviously everyone wants their property's value to increase. I don't think anyone buys a home with the expectation that that property is going to be worth less at some point in the future. But if you are buying in most of the country, it might actually not be a good idea to hold on to that property for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, because your property taxes are eventually going to be an enormous amount of your living expenses. And yes, California does have higher property taxes than most of the country only because prices are so expensive here. But as an investor who's looking to have a rental property, California still makes the most sense compared to any other state. If you're buying a $1 million 3-bedroom house in Southern California, 10 years from now, that house is going to be worth twice as much as it is now. It's going to be worth $2 million. And if you take the 1% property tax rate, you're still going to be paying around $10,000 a year for that now $2 million house because it doubled in 10 years. And that is a significantly lower cost than buying the $2 million house 10 years from now. So for a lot of homeowners in California, it kind of just makes sense to hold on to that property forever and eventually turn it into a rental property because your initial property tax rate is so low. And that's why when we talk about owning real estate for a long period of time, California does make the most sense relative to almost every other state in the country. If you think about buying a $1 million house here, your hope is that it's going to be worth more money in 20, 30, 40 years. Let's say it doubles every 10 years, which real estate has done in California for the last 50, 60, 70 years. In fact, where I live, it has doubled in just the last 6 years. So if we take that math and that $1 million house doubled in 10 years, which would be $2 million, doubled again in 20 years, which would be $4 million, and then again in 30 years, that house would be worth $8 million, which if you're thinking that's so unrealistic, it's not going to happen, it has happened. It has literally been happening for the last 50 years. Prices have doubled almost every 10 years. So if we take that $1 million house you buy right now, and in 30 years, it's worth $8 million, your property tax is still taxed at that $1 million purchase price rather than the $8 million market value that your home is in. And if you bought that same house in Texas, I know Texas has cheaper real estate. You're not going to have too many $1 million homes unless you're in major cities like Houston or Dallas, for example, or you're buying an enormous mansion. But if you buy a $500,000 house in Texas, which is already at a higher property tax rate, most of it is 1.5%, your property taxes are going to double in 10 years. So if your $500,000 house becomes $1 million in 10 years, and then becomes $2 million in 20 years, and then becomes $4 million in 30 years, which I think for anyone buying a house is hoping that their house value is going to double every 10 years. Otherwise, what's really the point in buying a home? Yes, you can own the house, you can call it yours, you can make whatever changes you want as opposed to renting. Maybe you just love the house. But I think for a lot of people, the financial decision is somewhere on top of their mind when determining what type of house, where they're going to buy, and how much the home costs. Financing is a big deal when becoming a homeowner, and it is something that you need to think about. So take that Texas example where you buy a $500,000 house. 30 years from now, if it doubles every 10 years, it's now worth $4 million. You're going to be paying 1.5% property taxes on $4 million, which is $60,000 a year. So if you bought a $500,000 house, you might have only been making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year to buy that house. But now 30 years from now, your property taxes could be your entire income, which is unbelievable to think about. I know incomes typically increase every couple years. So as time goes on, ideally your income is also increasing. Maybe you buy an investment property or two to increase your income even more. But your property tax rate is going to absolutely kill you in retirement. It's going to make it so difficult to afford that house. And I think that's why a lot of people decide to just sell their home when they're retiring and move into a much more affordable area of living. Maybe they rent somewhere when they're in retirement, move in with their kids, whatever the case may be. But I did want to make this video talking about how superior California property taxes are. And it's kind of something that a lot of people overlook when determining which state they want to buy an investment property in. It's because if you take Florida, for example, they have a limit of 10% a year on how much your taxes can increase. So for an investor, it might not be the ideal situation if you're someone who's looking for future growth, to increase your equity as you're renting your property out. California is just so much superior when discussing owning a home for the long term. So that's just my 2 cents on property taxes and why I think, in my opinion, California is probably the only state that I would want to buy a home. Because, again, yes, real estate prices double every 10 years. You don't want your property taxes to double every 10 years because it will make that home unaffordable at some point in the future. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. My name's Ian Phillips. I'm a realtor in Southern California. So if you're looking for an agent, whether you're buying or selling, reach out, love to chat. We can discuss a game plan, see what makes the most sense for you. I'll see you in my next video.